The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome. My name's Charles Christian. I'm the host of the Weird Tales Radio Show, and you're listening to episode 71. Coming up, Janie and I will be discussing more UFO contactees. But first, before we go any further, a little roundup of news in brief stories. Courtesy of our friends at the wildhunt.org, there's a story just in that a Wiccan professor in the United States has filed for religious discrimination. The lawsuit in the US District Court in the Western District of New York alleges a religious and gender discrimination against the St. Bonaventure University. The plaintiff is Pauline Hoffman, a PhD, and she alleges she was passed over for the position of provost and forced to resign as dean of the Jandoli School of Communication due to her religious practice as a Wiccan. The university assigned both provost and dean positions to male professors. Hoffman says the issues with the university began after she agreed to do an interview with a student television station to discuss Wicca. She says she told her boss about this, and her boss subsequently said, "We took a big chance hiring you as a Wiccan." After the interview, alleges Hoffman, she was asked to sign a document vowing to uphold Catholic values, to which she responded, "Well, if I was Jewish, would I have to sign this?" To which the college dean reportedly replied, "If you were Jewish, then I guess not." Prior to her lawsuit against the university, Hoffman had also filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and opted to proceed with legal action after exhausting the options offered by the EEOC. Hoffman, who has been a practicing Wiccan for about 20 years, is seeking in her lawsuit compensation for loss of income, medical bills from therapy, and damages for pain and suffering. And she also wishes to be reinstated in her position as a dean. The university has offered no comment, saying because it's a legal matter, it's not our policy or appropriate to comment on the case. If we hear more about it, we'll let you know. And in another story, we've again touched on this in the past, and this is the Vatican and its increased interest in providing courses and conferences on witchcraft and exorcism. And the organisers of the latest course on exorcism and prayers of liberation which they are particularly keen on doing because of the growing interest in witchcraft and paganism among young people. And it also includes vampirism and the celebration of Halloween. The latest course, which took place in May, was attended by 240 people, over 240 people. It cost $450 to attend the course. And for the first time, they opened the course not just previously been run. It's been run for the last 10 years, but this year they expanded it to include not just Catholics, but other religions, Christian religions. So it included Anglicans, Greek Orthodox, Lutherans, and Pentecostal churches, as well as doctors, psychiatrists, and psychologists. The organizer of the course, said Catholics are by no means the only Christians who have developed methods to help possess people or to rid a space of evil spirits. This is the first time we have included so many other religious representatives to share how this works. We think collaborating will help us create best practices. Yes, a bit frightening to see Management-Speke there in something religious like exorcisms. Anyway, attendees hope to return with a set of practices to combat the various tools employed by satanic forces. One speaker from Brazil and one from Nigeria focus specifically on black magic. The Nigerian speaker described a juju curse which is being used to force women into the sex trade. Basically, the curse, which results supposedly in physical maiming, frightens them so much they agree to go along and become prostitutes. While a Brazilian speaker discussed the besta fera, a ferocious centaur-like creature that appears during the full moon. Legend describes the creature as an incarnation of the devil, and cause is a madness. There was also a Filipino speaker who discussed how to identify and battle the Aswang spirit, a shape-shifting spirit which in various guises, including a witch, is the ultimate form of vindictiveness. Its other guises are as a vampire, a weird-dog and a ghoul. So, there's the Roman Catholic Church coming into the 21st century with business management style approach to courses on exorcism. And another little story here, it's a rather sad one. It's from Japan, and it is in the aftermath of the tsunami in 2011, and the small town of Otushi in northern Japan, where 2,000 residents were swept away or otherwise killed when the tsunami hit. And one of the residents there, who'd already been grieving his cousin before the tsunami hit, has the idea of placing an old telephone booth at the bottom of his garden, complete with a disconnected rotary phone. He would ring his cousin's number, and his words would be carried by the wind as he spoke to him. After the tsunami hit, the word about the wind phone spread, and many more people have come to Oshushi to call those they have lost. So, rather touching, sad story that, but once again, interesting use of modern technology with ancient arts. And finally, closer to home, a pub in Norwich's Bedford Street. Norwich is our local city, called The Wild Man, is up for let. The current tenants quit a few weeks ago. There is some dispute as to why it's called The Wild Man. One argument is it was named after Peter, the wild boy, who was arrested, having been found wandering the streets of Norwich in the 18th century. A few years later, it was discovered that this prisoner was in fact a man who disappeared from his home aged 39 and never returned. Another theory about the Wild Man is that the pub was named after a child who burned to death in the cellar of the pub. The building was used to house prisoners when cells at the castle became too full in the 1800s. The story goes that the 16-year-old boy was sentenced to hang for stealing his master's handkerchief. In an attempt to burn down the doors to escape, the wild boy was burned to death and is now said to haunt the site. Sudden drops of temperature are often reported in the rooms, and former landlords have reported heavy beer barrels moving around of their own accord. So, that's the Wild Man pub. If you fancy taking it on, you may well take on a ghost as well. Right, on with the show.
Now, a few episodes ago, we were talking about a new book, A is for Adamski, which is written by Adam Goreichley and Greg Bishop, and it's on the golden age of UFO contactees. This is not people who've been abducted by UFOs, but people who have made friends with little shiny aliens come down to help us. And we found it so interesting that we're looking at a few more cases. Over to you, Janie.
Right, okay. Well, yes, obviously some you have to worry about their mental health. And some seem to be, well, just shysters really, I suppose. But some are just fascinating, I think, by the amount of detail that's in there. Anyway, so I just flicked it open, almost at random. Lee Childers is his name, 1922 to 1982. And he was treated to his first spaceship trip in 1955 by the extraterrestrial Commander Markozan. And this included a stopover on Mars, which he revealed to be a dead planet. In addition to a jaunt to the moon, which featured cities that could be raised and lowered in and out of moon craters. This is sounding familiar. Commander Markozan's spaceship, which travelled at the astounding speed of 250,000 miles an hour. Now this is just so interesting to visualise. Caused Childers to become so space sick that one of the crew members, an 8-foot tall fellow, held him out a porthole to allow him to throw up. Well, it certainly cleared his head. It probably cleared his head from his body, to be fair. But anyway, all in all, Childers was taken on a total of 21 such trips, which he claimed to be a spacefaring record. On one of the voyages, on a spaceship that was 100 miles in diameter and called Tragedon, Childers burst onto the ufological scene in a big way in December 1958 when a saucer club called the Bureau of UFO Research and Analysis arranged a press conference in New York City where he announced to the world that in addition to being a baker from Detroit, Michigan, he was also a 250-year-old interplanetary traveller, otherwise known as Prince Neeson, from the royal family of planet Tythum. At his press conference, Childers unveiled a rejuvenation machine, which had allegedly brought him back from death on 3 separate occasions, each after tangling with some unruly men in black type persons who kept killing Prince Neeson on account of his efforts to alert mankind that we're doomed for nuclear annihilation if we didn't heed the Space Brothers' dire warning. So there you go.
Yeah.
Usual thing.
Yep.
Now, I just mentioned this bit. Accompanying Childers was a couple of female assistants, Beth Docker and Fanny Lowery. It was later revealed that Childers had ditched his wife and 5 children for the tender charms of Miss Docker, who in time adopted the name Princess Nigona. Not like his wife, who was a goner. This was Princess
Oh,
Nigona.
very good, very good.
Anyway, yes. During the same weekend as his press conference, Childers, along with his female posse, appeared on Long John Nebel's party line and before going online predicted that a fleet of flying saucers would show up on cue and rebroadcast the programme to a worldwide audience using advanced saucer technology. I think that was to make sure he got the gig of getting on that. Which is anyway, Nebel, who was, as we just said, the chap who hosted party
Long John
line.
Neville.
He was famous for accommodating all manner of kooks, found Childers' claims so preposterous that he kicked Prince Neeson and his crew off the airways just a few minutes into the show. It was the first time and only time that Long John had used the hook on a guest. Needless to say, the fleet of predicted saucers were a no-show. Even George Van Tassel, obviously who we all know, who hardly ever had a harsh word for his fellow contactees, contactees denounced Childers as a fraud on the grounds that he had bad teeth. Something Van Tassel considered an impossibility for someone purported to be a true interplanetary traveller.
Well,
There.
so if you're going to travel to other planets, get your teeth fixed.
Well, apparently. He was quite handsome, actually, I have to say. Quite good looking.
Mm-hmm.
Looks quite normal, really. Of course, he's not smiling in his photo. Could be a snaggle-toothed horror. We don't know. Anyway, that's him.
Yep. Right. Now, there's one I want to have a little look at here. And this is Dino Kraspedon, who died in the age of 65 in 1985. And he was taken on board a flying saucer in November 1952 and given an hour-long tour by the ship's captain, who informed him that he had to get back to whatever planet he was from, but would return again. And 5 months later, the flying saucer did indeed return, showing up at Dino's doorstep and pretending to be a Jehovah's Witness so as not to alarm Dino's wife.
Cunning.
Cunning, indeed. And the flying saucer captain, who came from a satellite of Jupiter, met with Dino on 5 separate occasions. And Dino went on to write a book, My Contact with Flying Saucers, which recounts the many conversations he had, including amazing revelations on matter and energy. One of the startling revelations was that another sun would soon be entering our solar system as a red star and would then turn into a blue star, and that our sun and this new sun would counterbalance each other and rotate around the centre of the galaxy. So we'd have 2 suns, but it didn't actually happen. And the flying saucer captain also revealed secrets of anti-gravity, but said he did not want Dino to share these secrets because he feared the information would fall into the wrong hands, and then it would be used to devious ends to the detriment of mankind. And not surprisingly, the flying saucer captain and his colleagues wanted mankind to become more peaceful and to follow the Space Brother way, which was all love and light. Dino's flying saucer captain also made several remarkably accurate predictions about a series of robberies, bombings and murders that would take place in Brazil in late August 1968.
Okay.
And guess what's going to happen out here?
I'm just slightly ahead of this, yes.
Yep.
I have a feeling in my
It turns
guts.
out that Dino had an alter ego, a la Dino Felix. Not the best of aliases. And he was found to be the leader of a gang that had perpetrated a series of robberies, bombings and murders in Brazil. When arrested, he claimed that he had diplomatic immunity because he was an ambassador to Earth from Venus, and that my friends from space will come here and free me and avenge my arrest. You can look for tragic consequences for humanity when the flying saucers invade this planet.
And did he get off the rap?
No, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but shortly afterwards transferred to a mental health facility.
Ah, right. And there we have it, basically.
Yes. Now you've got another one.
Oh, I did find another one. Yes, this is Mead Lane is his name. He was born in 1882, died in 1961. And he was a former English department head at Illinois Wesleyan University. However, he left there in the 1940s to pursue a career in parapsychology, and he formed something called the Borderland Sciences Research Associates. Basically, they were looking into facts and events which orthodox or official science cannot or will not investigate. To this end, he teamed up with a psychic medium, so it's starting to get a little bit off message here, called Mark Probert, who was once called the telegnostic from San Diego. And he was trying to establish interstellar contact. Basically, Probert told a local reporter that he'd seen craft landing, and I think it was in the middle of he was waiting for a meteor shower in 1946 and saw the passage of a strange structure in the sky. And apparently he said after this event, he told a local reporter, the strange machine is called a carita. It is attracted at this time because the Earth is emitting a column of light which makes it easier to approach. Somebody's shining a torch up the ceiling. The machine is powered by people possessing a very advanced knowledge of anti-gravity forces. It has 10,000 parts, a small but very powerful motor operating by electricity, and it moves the wings, and an outer structure of light balsam wood coated with an alloy. Just be for getting through that slightly hot bit that you have to get. The people within are very non-aggressive and have been trying to contact Earth for many years. They have very light bodies. That's why they could use the balsa wood, I suppose.
Yes.
They fear to land, but would be willing to meet a committee of scientists at an isolated spot or on a mountaintop. So this is Probert, not our Mead Lane chap. But anyway, Probert channeled the Inner Circle, which was a group of ascended masters who were in contact with entities known as the Etherians, who visited Earth in ether ships from the fourth dimension. And the Etherians, according to Probert, were able to mat and demat, that is short for materialise and dematerialise, as a means to enter and depart the Earth plane by lowering or raising their vibrational levels. Yeah, sorry. It's all scientific.
Yes.
I can barely understand it. Anyway, these ships, ether ships, as would be expected, came from a place called Etheria, which was alongside, inside, outside of her world. Which is quite complex and interesting, isn't it? Because we tend to think in very much sort of pedantic and pedestrian, realistic terms of it all, don't we? But he saw it as slightly more complicated than that. All of this is explained, more or less, in Mead Lane's The Ether Ship Mystery and Its Solution. Lane was among the first, if not the first, to propose the interdimensional theory when most contactees were content with just the Venusians sporting long blonde hair and mouthing syrupy New Age platitudes. It wasn't until a couple of decades later that the interdimensional theory started to gain traction from cutting-edge ufologists like Jacques Vallée and John Keel. So he was a bit
ahead of his time.
Ahead of his time. Yeah.
Yes.
But that's him.
That's him.
Yeah.
Well.
Made famous.
Yes. And now we'll boldly go forth to infinity and beyond.
Well, it is interesting quite a lot. I keep recognising concepts that one sees in recent movies and not so recent movies.
Yes.
And you think, well, how clever of these writers and filmmakers to come up with the ideas. No, they didn't. They pinched them from people in the 50s who'd already thought them up. Allegedly.
Thanks to the aliens who'd contacted them and told them about it.
Well, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I suppose that's true.
Yes.
Or not, depending on how you think about these things.
Thank you very much. That's it.
time has run out for us here on the Weird Tales radio show. The ghost at Misery Corner is moaning outside our windows even now. One final little thought before we go. You may recall Janie and I were discussing the fact we'd had DNA tests done. Well, Janie's DNA's come in, and I was waiting for mine before we ran it. But unfortunately, the DNA company got in touch to say that they were unable to find any usable human DNA in my sample. Now, this does confirm a family rumour that I'm actually a foundling and half fae, which might explain it, but probably a more plausible explanation is that I didn't quite do the DNA testing correctly and the sample wasn't adequate. A friend of mine did a similar job with his dog and wanted to check its breeding and sent away a DNA sample, and it basically came back half Alsatian, half envelope. The sample had become polluted. Ah well, we'll eventually get there. But until then, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back again same time next week, and until then, stay well, stay weird. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.